Most people go through life believing they're in control of their thoughts, their desires, and their understanding of the world. But beneath the surface of human consciousness, two powerful forces have been shaping reality from the shadows, pulling you toward extremes, distorting your perception, and keeping you from true spiritual balance. One of these forces tempts you toward illusion, arrogance, and detachment from reality, luring you into empty spiritual highs and intellectual pride. The other drags you down into cold materialism, trapping you in a world where only numbers, logic, and mechanization seem to matter. They appear to be opposites, locked in an eternal struggle, but in truth their apparent opposition conceals a deeper synergy, a pact of deception designed to prevent the human being from achieving true spiritual balance and self-realization. These are the Luciferic and Ahrimanic forces, and according to Rudolf Steiner, they are the greatest unseen influences on human evolution. They shape religion, science, politics, and even the way you experience your own consciousness. And if you don't understand them, you are already under their control. But there is a way to break free. In this video, we will explore Steiner's revelations about these two adversarial forces, how they manifest in our world today, and most importantly, how you can recognize and transcend them. Stay with me. What you're about to learn may change the way you see everything. Throughout the vast currents of human history, forces beyond the immediate grasp of our senses have shaped the evolution of consciousness. What we perceive as historical epochs, civilizations rising and falling, ideologies clashing, and spiritual traditions emerging, are but the outer expressions of deeper, more profound currents. These currents, unseen yet ever present, weave through the fabric of time, guiding humanity's development in accordance with cosmic law. Rudolf Steiner, born in 1861, was an Austrian philosopher, esotericist, and founder of anthroposophy, a spiritual movement integrating elements of Western mysticism, Christianity, and Gothian science. In his 1919 lecture series, The Influences of Lucifer and Ahriman, Steiner explored the dual influences of these two figures. Lucifer, representing excessive spiritualization, egotism, and detachment from reality, while Ahriman embodied materialism and cold intellectualism. He taught that Christ serves as the balancing force between these extremes, guiding humanity toward a harmonious path of spiritual development. These lectures were part of Steiner's broader teachings on spiritual evolution and cosmic forces. As modern society becomes increasingly polarized between hypermaterialism and disembodied idealism, Steiner's insights on these forces seem more relevant than ever, offering a framework to understand and navigate contemporary spiritual and ideological struggles. Steiner taught that in the 3rd millennium BC, a singular event reshaped the spiritual currents of human evolution, the incarnation of Lucifer. According to Steiner, this was not a metaphorical occurrence, but a literal incarnation in human form somewhere in the East. Just as Christ would later embody divine balance, Lucifer's presence in the physical world infused civilization with an unprecedented intellectual and mystical radiance. The hallmark of Lucifer's influence was illumination without restraint, a spiritual fire that brought profound cosmic knowledge but lacked the grounding force of moral responsibility. He is responsible for luring humans away from material existence toward an overemphasis on subjective experience, dreams, and personal enlightenment at the cost of communal and physical responsibilities. The ancient mystery schools, particularly in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Persia, absorbed and transmitted this knowledge, preserving it within esoteric traditions. These schools cultivated an understanding of the stars, the human soul's divine origins, and the mechanisms of reincarnation and karma. While this wisdom elevated humanity's consciousness, it also introduced great spiritual imbalance. The power granted by such knowledge, when severed from the ethical structure of moral conscience, led to the rise of priestly elites, hierarchical religious structures, and spiritual exclusivity. The initiated became rulers, wielding their insights to guide or control those who lacked access to the mysteries. Lucifer's incarnation thus left a double legacy. On one hand, a gift of spiritual wisdom and enlightenment, and on the other, a potential for hubris and detachment from earthly responsibility. Rudolph, having died before the discovery of the Nag Hammadi library, but having access to the Pistis Sophia, or those that had studied it, believed that the Gnostic traditions that emerged bore the unmistakable imprint of this influence, emphasizing direct spiritual knowledge, but often struggling to reconcile it with the realities of human suffering and moral development. It was precisely this one-sided ascent toward the divine that necessitated the Christ impulse. While Lucifer offered the light of knowledge, Christ would bring the light of love, anchoring the spiritual within the realm of human ethics and responsibility. His mission was not to extinguish Lucifer's fire, but to temper it, to bring wisdom into harmony with compassion, and cosmic awareness into alignment with human morality. Understanding the Luciferic impulse that shaped ancient traditions allows us to recognize its lingering presence in modern spiritual movements. Even today, the pursuit of enlightenment without grounding, the desire to transcend rather than transform, and the elevation of knowledge over love remain challenges that must be addressed. Steiner believed that the true path forward is not the rejection of Luciferic wisdom, but its integration within a balanced spiritual life, one that acknowledges the necessity of both knowledge and moral responsibility. Just as Lucifer's incarnation elevated human consciousness toward spiritual heights, Ahriman's coming incarnation threatens to cast it into unrelenting materialism. Unlike Lucifer, whose temptation is in excess of spiritual enlightenment, Ahriman's force works through mechanization, intellectual rigidity, and the denial of all that is beyond the physical realm. According to Steiner, Ahriman seeks a direct incarnation in the West in the 3rd millennium AD, and by the looks of things, he seems to have arrived a bit early. His influence is palpable in technological dominance, economic reductionism, and the purely mechanistic worldview that governs modern society. Unlike past eras where spiritual wisdom played a central role in shaping culture, today's world increasingly submits to the tyranny of quantification and efficiency, all hallmarks of Ahriman's growing power. The most insidious aspect of Ahriman's influence is that it appears rational, practical, and beneficial. Scientific materialism, devoid of spiritual insight, is hailed as progress. Human interactions are governed by algorithms and market forces, reducing the soul to a collection of data points. Even within religion, simplistic literalism strips spiritual traditions of their esoteric depth, leaving only dogma and bureaucracy. Steiner taught that Ahriman's incarnation, should it occur unchecked, would finalize this descent, severing humanity from its higher nature. The human being, once poised between heaven and earth, would become an automation of material forces, incapable of perceiving anything beyond immediate physical existence. Ahriman's influence is not a sudden or isolated event. It is a gradual infiltration into human consciousness, shaping the structures of modern civilization in preparation for his incarnation. This influence does not come in the form of an overt rejection of spirituality, but rather through subtle distortions, redirecting human attention entirely toward material concerns, logic-driven intellect, and mechanized thinking. The more society becomes immersed in these forces without awareness, the more fertile the ground becomes between Ahriman's direct manifestation in the physical world. Steiner warned that Ahriman's greatest advantage would be humanity's ignorance of his methods. Unlike Lucifer, whose influence can be recognized in the extremes of mystical excess, Ahriman's workings appear so deeply embedded in science, economics, nationalism, and religious literalism that they often go unquestioned. Following are the primary avenues through which Ahriman is actively shaping the present world to pave the way for his future dominion. The most effective tool in Ahriman's arsenal is the modern scientific worldview devoid of spiritual reality. This is not to say that science itself is inherently Ahrimanic. Rather, it is the belief that all existence can be explained solely in terms of physical laws, mathematics, and empirical observation, or in other words, materialism. The paradigm shift initiated by figures such as Galileo, Copernicus, and Newton, while greatly advancing human knowledge, also severed the intimate connection between the cosmos and the human spirit. What was once perceived as a living universe imbued with divine intelligence has now been reduced to a system of mechanical processes. In modern times, astrophysics, biology, and neuroscience frequently uphold the idea that human consciousness itself is nothing more than an epiphenomenon of neural activity, denying the reality of the soul. Even within psychology, once a study of the soul's depth and purpose, reductionist frameworks have led to the dominance of behaviorism, cognitive science, and neurological determinism, all of which deny any reality beyond the brain's chemistry. This scientific materialism blinds humanity to the deeper forces of destiny, karma, and spiritual evolution, effectively trapping the intellect in a closed loop where only the measurable and tangible are acknowledged as real. By encouraging this worldview, Ahriman works to cut humanity off from spiritual intuition. In a world where only numbers, statistics, and mechanical laws dictate truth, the realm of the spirit is increasingly dismissed as irrelevant. This prepares humanity to accept a wholly mechanized and soulless reality, where divine wisdom is no longer sought and human consciousness is reduced to a biological machine subject to external programming. Ahriman's influence is especially potent in the realm of economics and material production. Modern economic systems function in such a way that they prioritize efficiency, wealth accumulation, and productivity at the expense of inner spiritual development. The global economic model has gradually led to a situation where the majority of human effort is spent on the acquisition of financial security, career advancement, and material goods, leaving little time or energy for spiritual contemplation or inner growth. Education, once a means of cultivating wisdom, has largely become an instrument of economic utility. Schools and universities emphasize practical knowledge, technical skills, and marketable expertise, shaping individuals to function as productive units within a capitalist machine rather than as independent seekers of truth. The modern individual is thus led to believe that personal worth is measured not by the development of virtue, character, or spiritual insight, but by one's capacity to generate wealth and contribute to economic growth. Economic forces ensure that spirituality itself is either commercialized or marginalized. Many spiritual traditions have been co-opted into industries of self-help, superficial mindfulness, and monetized wellness programs, stripping them of their deeper transformative power. In this way, spiritual aspirations are pacified, diluted, or redirected into consumerism, ensuring that true inner liberation is never fully realized. Just look at the recent corporatization of mindfulness practices. What is intended to be a powerful way to awaken higher awareness, attune to the divine, and keep your ego in check, has been bastardized by corporate America as a way to reduce stress and discontentment at our jobs so that we can all work harder and longer. Ahriman's goal is to sever the organic unity of humanity, fostering division, separation, and conflict. While Lucifer leads individuals into spiritual elitism and detachment, Ahriman seeks to bind them completely to the material realm, often by emphasizing nationalistic, ethnic, or ideological boundaries that prevent a higher sense of human brotherhood. In modern times, nationalism is often disguised as a noble cause, appealing to a sense of identity and cultural pride. However, when viewed from a spiritual perspective, it becomes clear that excessive nationalism isolates communities from the larger cosmic reality and reinforces tribal thinking over universal spiritual unity. This aligns perfectly with Ahriman's goal, to fracture humanity into competing factions, ensuring that people remain fixated on earthly power struggles rather than seeking their shared divine heritage. By intensifying political divisions, ethnic rivalries, and ideological warfare, Ahriman ensures that people remain deeply entrenched in earthly concerns. Instead of seeking a higher spiritual destiny, individuals and nations become consumed with territorial disputes, political dominance, and economic conquest. These artificial conflicts blind humanity to the greater spiritual forces at work, leaving people unable to recognize that the real struggle is not against each other, but against the forces manipulating them from behind the veil. To drive this point home, I want to read Steiner's exact words on this topic. Another tendency in modern life of benefit to Ahriman in preparing his incarnation is all that is so clearly in evidence in nationalism. Whatever can separate people into groups, whatever can alienate them from mutual understanding the whole world over and drive wedges between them, strengthens Ahriman's impulse. In reality, we should recognize the voice of Ahriman in what is so often proclaimed nowadays as a new ideal, freedom of the peoples, even the smallest, and so forth. But blood relationship has ceased to be the decisive factor, and if this outworn notion persists, we shall be playing straight into the hands of Ahriman. His interests are promoted too by the fact that people are taken up with the most divergent shades of party opinions, of which the one can be justified as easily as the other. A socialist party program and an anti-socialist program can be supported by arguments of equal validity, and if people fail to realize that this kind of proof lies so utterly on the surface that the no and the yes can both be justified with our modern intelligence, useful as it is for natural science, but not for a different kind of knowledge, if people do not realize that this intelligence lies entirely on the surface, in spite of serving economic life so effectively, they will continue to apply it to social life and spiritual life irrespectively. One group will prove one thing, another its exact opposite, and as both proofs can be shown to be equally logical, hatred and bitterness, of which there is more than enough in the world, will be intensified. These trends too are exploited by Ahriman, in preparation for his earthly incarnation. That second to last sentence rings shockingly true today. As we become more and more entrenched in our ideological differences, all they do is divide us further and further into smaller, isolated groups until we feel like the whole world is against us. One of Ahriman's most deceptive strategies is his infiltration of organized religion. Unlike Lucifer, who tempts people to abandon structured faith for mystical excess, Ahriman works within religious institutions to rigidify, dogmatize, and bureaucratize spirituality, ensuring that faith becomes a lifeless system of rules and doctrines, rather than a living path to divine experience. Religious fundamentalism, whether Christian, Islamic, or otherwise, often represents an Ahrimanic distortion of spiritual truth. The deeper esoteric dimensions of faith are deliberately obscured, leaving only legalism, fear-based obedience, and rigid interpretations of sacred texts. The result is a form of religion that emphasizes external authority over inner revelation, effectively binding believers within strict hierarchical structures that discourage free spiritual inquiry. Additionally, many modern religious institutions have become deeply entangled in politics, economic systems, and institutional power, functioning more as earthly organizations than spiritual movements. Faith is no longer about inner transformation and union within the divine, but about control, social order, and the enforcement of rigid moral codes. This ensures that the liberating aspect of spiritual truth is suppressed, leaving individuals spiritually stagnant and easily manipulated. By promoting these rigid and lifeless forms of religion, Ahriman ensures that true Christ consciousness remains obscured. Rather than guiding individuals toward the direct experience of the divine, religious institutions increasingly function as mechanized systems of control, reinforcing Ahriman's grip over human consciousness. Ahriman's success depends on humanity's inability to see his influence. Unlike Lucifer, who dazzles with the allure of spiritual ascent, Ahriman works through the mundane, the practical. He seeks to enslave the mind to materialistic thinking, ensuring that humans become cogs in an ever-expanding machine where spiritual reality is considered fantasy, and only the tangible, measurable, and profitable are deemed real. While Ahriman and Lucifer appear as opposing forces, one binding humanity to rigid materialism and the other leading it toward ungrounded spiritual detachment, Steiner reveals that these two adversarial beings do not act entirely in isolation. Rather, they operate in a complex and often complementary dynamic, working in tandem to keep humanity ensnared in illusion. Their apparent opposition conceals a deeper synergy, a pact of deception designed to prevent the human being from achieving true spiritual balance and self-realization. Ahriman seeks to bind human consciousness to the purely external world, ensuring that people define reality solely through materialistic and mechanistic reasoning. Lucifer, in contrast, seeks to detach consciousness from the world entirely, seducing the soul into mystical abstractions and ethereal fantasies that sever its connection to earthly responsibilities. When these forces act together, they create a closed circuit of deception, one in which the human being either sinks into cold intellectualism and material enslavement, or becomes lost in unrealistic spiritual idealism. One of the most insidious aspects of their collaboration is how they manipulate the human yearning for freedom and knowledge. Ahriman promises freedom through technological progress, economic security, and scientific mastery, yet his vision ultimately leads to a world devoid of spirit, where human autonomy is surrendered to systems, algorithms, and bureaucratic control. Lucifer, on the other hand, offers an escape from the constraints of the material world, but his path often leads to illusion, egotism, and a rejection of grounded reality. Modern culture exhibits clear signs of their dual influence. Many people today either become hyper-rationalistic, believing that technology and data will solve all human problems, or they reject external reality altogether in favor of pseudo-spiritual escapism. This duality serves their ultimate goal, to keep humanity oscillating between the two extremes, never reaching the state of equilibrium where true wisdom and spiritual development can unfold. One of the greatest vulnerabilities of modern humanity is the tendency to equate knowledge with information and wisdom with data. In an age of endless access to facts, figures, and analytics, there exists the illusion that understanding follows automatically from accumulation. This is where Ahriman's influence is most insidious. By encouraging the belief that quantifiable knowledge is the only form of truth, he obscures the necessity of deeper spiritual discernment. In the modern world, faith has shifted from spiritual insight to statistical certainty. The dominance of algorithmic thinking, predictive modeling, and artificial intelligence reflects this shift, reinforcing the idea that human thought is reducible to mechanistic processes. People place blind trust in scientific consensus, media narratives, and institutional authority, without engaging in true critical reflection. As a result, decisions are increasingly made based on surface-level interpretations of reality, while deeper metaphysical truths remain ignored or outright dismissed. Ahriman thrives on humanity's need for certainty. The more people demand absolute proof and measurable outcomes, the further they drift from inner wisdom and spiritual intuition. Ancient wisdom traditions understood that true knowledge is not found solely in the external world, but in direct inner experience and contemplation. Yet in today's data-driven society, anything that cannot be measured, quantified, or proven is regarded as irrelevant or even dangerous. This obsession with certainty leads to a disenchantment of the world, where reality is viewed through the cold lens of numbers and equations. Concepts such as soul, destiny, karma, and divine purpose are discarded in favor of rigid empiricism, leaving humanity disconnected from the deeper currents of existence. The human being, once seen as a vessel of divine consciousness, is now perceived as a biological machine, predictable and programmable like any other system. Another consequence of this blind faith in data is the erosion of critical independent thought. The more people rely on external sources for validation, be it governments, scientific institutions, or media conglomerates, the less they cultivate inner discernment. Ahriman does not need to impose control through force. He succeeds when people willingly surrender their capacity for deeper contemplation in favor of pre-packaged, expert-approved conclusions. Education systems increasingly prioritize rote memorization and standardized testing over philosophical inquiry and ethical reasoning. In political and scientific discourse, dissenting voices are often dismissed as irrational or unscientific, reinforcing the belief that there is only one permissible way of thinking. This narrowing of intellectual freedom is a direct result of Ahrimanic influence, ensuring that people remain trapped within rigid frameworks of logic and analysis, unable to perceive the deeper truths beyond them. If Ahriman's success depends on keeping humanity unaware of his influence, then the most potent antidote is spiritual awakening and conscious recognition of his workings in the world. Awareness is not merely intellectual understanding. It is a lived inner knowledge, cultivated through direct spiritual engagement. In an age where materialism dominates and mechanistic thinking prevails, the call to spiritual science has never been more urgent. Spiritual science, as outlined by Steiner, offers a methodical approach to understanding the hidden forces at play in both the cosmos and human consciousness. Unlike blind faith or abstract mysticism, it's a path of knowledge, one that integrates rigorous intellectual inquiry with the deep intuitive insights of the soul. By developing higher perception and discernment, individuals can begin to see through the illusion of both materialism and deceptive spiritualism, breaking free from the unconscious influences of Ahriman and Lucifer. The first step in countering Ahriman's influence is to cultivate a clear, active awareness of how his forces operate in daily life. This means questioning the narratives, ideologies, and institutions that shape modern thought. It requires willingness to seek deeper meaning beyond surface appearances, to look at scientific advancements, economic structures, and even religious doctrines with an eye toward their hidden spiritual implications. This doesn't mean rejecting scientific inquiry, but rather reintegrating it with higher consciousness. True wisdom emerges when knowledge is placed within a greater spiritual context, where it serves not merely as a means of control, but as a pathway to understanding the divine order of the cosmos. The human being must reclaim the ability to think independently, to trust in the insights of the soul, and to seek truth beyond the limitations of the purely analytical mind. This reintegration begins on the individual level, through meditative practice, inner reflection, and ethical engagement. A person can awaken to the reality that science, philosophy, and spirituality are not opposing forces, but interconnected paths to higher knowledge. By approaching both material and spiritual disciplines within a spirit of reverence and inquiry, humanity can reclaim its ability to navigate existence with both wisdom and practicality. Ahriman thrives on passivity and intellectual complacency. He benefits when people accept the world as it is presented to them, without questioning its deeper purpose. To break free from this, we must cultivate a living, engaged relationship with knowledge, one that does not reduce reality to mere data points, but instead recognizes the spiritual currents flowing beneath material existence. Humanity stands at a crossroads. The forces of Ahriman and Lucifer exert their influence more strongly than ever, shaping the structures of society, the nature of thought, and the fabric of individual consciousness. The challenge is not merely to resist these forces, but to rise above them, integrating their influences into a balanced and awakened state of being. True wakefulness is not simply an awareness of external events or historical trends. It is a heightened state of inner perception, an ability to discern the hidden spiritual forces at work behind the material world. It requires a commitment to conscious living, where neither intellectual enslavement nor spiritual escapism dictates one's course. Steiner's vision is not one of despair, but of opportunity, a call for human beings to reclaim their spiritual destiny. Awareness of Ahriman's and Lucifer's influences allows one to stand firmly at the center, neither rejecting the material world nor losing oneself in abstract spirituality. To truly awaken, one must actively engage in spiritual development, moral discernment, and independent thought. This is the essence of what it means to be human, not to be controlled by unseen forces, but to recognize them, understand their workings, and use that knowledge to cultivate true freedom. The task of this age is great, but so too is the potential for transformation. By developing spiritual science as a living force within, by reclaiming the sacred from mechanization, and by fostering a harmonious union of intellect and spirit, humanity can step forward into a future not dictated by external control. The choice remains with each individual. To awaken is to accept the responsibility of spiritual sovereignty, to cultivate wisdom in a world of distraction, and to illuminate the darkness with the light of true understanding. This is the call to wakefulness, a call that resounds in the depths of every soul willing to listen. Thanks again for listening. If you enjoy this content, please like the video and subscribe for more. Hit the notification bell to make sure you don't miss a future video, and leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Where do you see Ahriman's influence in the world today? Where do you see Lucifer's influence in the world today? Any other thoughts you have? I look forward to reading all your comments. Until next time.